Welcome back to Making Game for the End of the World. So, this week has been quite interesting in that we had the announcement recently of Unreal Engine 5.8 being the last one before the new Unreal Engine 6. And the Unreal Engine 6 sort of delivery period is essentially going to be somewhere around 2.5 years' time-ish. Which means that this is probably kind of the last release. Probably there's going to be a 5.9, I kind of figure they'll do that eventually. But what it means is that this is kind of like the stable build of the engine that we're going to be running the game on. And so essentially I can start sort of fixing things that are broken or trying to sort of complete systems. And so what I've been focusing on most of this last few weeks is input control. And input control in Unreal Engine's kind of sketchy a little bit. There's multiple systems. There's the default input system that Unreal Engine 4 had, and there's a new one called Enhanced Input. And then on top of that, there's the user interface stuff called UMG that's on top of a thing called Slate. And then there's a thing on top of the UMG called Common UI that kind of deals with the crossover between input devices like gamepads, mouse and keyboard, the different gamepads for the different consoles and that kind of thing. So ultimately, what we're kind of dealing with is a multiple set of systems, each of which kind of annoy the crap out of me for different reasons. So what you're seeing on screen is me just playing with a new build mode and like trying to work out the user interface with it. So it's essentially sort of dealing with things like what happens if you use a D-pad on a gamepad, can you use a mouse at the same time, can you do things like filtering and that kind of thing? Because there'll be probably several thousand different things that you can build in the game. And so ultimately what I'm trying to do is get the kind of interactions working, even if the user interface is kind of rough, because it gives me a chance to sort of work out like what actually works the way I want it and what doesn't. You can play loads of games, which I tend to do for like inspiration and that kind of thing. But ultimately I want a thing that's kind of different, right? It's not just a copy of every other game. So what you're seeing here is the fact that I'm testing things like collision for the object that's going to be built and that kind of stuff. You'll see if you look at my earlier videos, I've already developed a system that does this. But I'm trying a different sort of code architecture for it this time around, just to see if it makes more sense to me. So one of the things that you can kind of see here is that I sort of do a thing called a raycast through the character. So another thing that I've been kind of doing is looking at the different asset packs I've got available and just kind of running through some of them, getting them imported into the engine, trying them out, looking for whether they're going to fit the theme or not. So this particular asset pack is like an underground sort of bunker silo building modular system. And so this is one that I think will definitely end up in the game in some shape or form, possibly with like an airlock above it, that kind of thing. But again, all of these asset packs, I'm kind of trying to get a certain style of asset. Obviously, I'm not an artist, right? I'm not going to make all of these things myself. So for the most part, what I'll end up spending a lot of development time doing is setting up the various asset packs I've got available to me and purchased to be interactive, because, a lot of them don't really have much interaction. They're just sort of art assets. So things like, if there's a seat in the world, can you sit down on it? If there's a terminal, does it actually do something if you interact with it? That kind of setup is not done by default for all of these art assets. So it's essentially kind of filtering out the content, filtering in the content, and then making sure that it's rigged up for interactivity and that kind of thing. you'll see here that there's actually no way to actually build the object in the build system yet, which is a bit of a problem, but that's it's a minor thing, really. So you'll see that every asset pack's got different things wrong with it. In this particular case, there's some hidden collision objects that stop the build from kind of working. Pretty much every asset pack I've purchased has had like multiple things that I needed to fix. So it's not just a sort of easy drop in most of the time. And that's fine, right? You know, it's part of development. Like ultimately the fact that I'm not having to sort of make all of the art myself is a big win, right? It's just that I have to do things like add collision, make sure the lighting works in real time. Just a really sort of wide variety of like fixing things and setting them up and doing things like profiling to make sure the texture sizes are all correct and, you know, that the lights don't take up too much render time and that kind of thing. You'll see things like this one here where the lights have got like a mesh around them that casts shadows, and you kind of need to turn that off because it looks terrible. So stuff like that, right? It's not particularly complicated. It's just kind of time consuming. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'll just turn that down. That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? So anyway, the point is that there's tons of work kind of halfway in progress in terms of like using our assets, making sure that everything's fixed up, making everything interactable, and actually building the interaction systems out. So that initial build system will eventually support first and third person. It'll support things like grid snapping and snapping. It'll support non-snapping as well, because that's the thing people want to do. And it'll snap objects to each other and do, I think I'm kind of going to go for an enshrouded style thing, but without maybe the voxel building. You know, inspired by games like Satisfactory and Enshrouded. I think it's Enshrouded. Maybe it's Avowed. Anyway, the one that does a lot of base building stuff. People seem to like that sort of that system. So ultimately, making sure all the assets kind of work and making sure that like building things works to my satisfaction at least. And I am quite picky with these things, honestly. So you'll see that in this particular video, we'll have a look at a bunch of different like asset packs that I've been integrating into the game. Some of them work kind of better than others. Some have tweaks to do. There's always a sort of balance, right? A trade-off of these things. Things like performance sometimes isn't great. Kit Bash 3D especially has a bunch of art assets that look good, but actually don't have things like collision volumes. And so, you know, even the things that look great can sometimes require quite a lot of work. You know, they can have massive polygon counts. They can have huge textures that slow everything down. So ultimately, it is work, you know, everything that appears in the game, none of it's kind of natural, right? You've developed things and tested them, and you know, as a solo developer, that is a pretty big challenge, you know. So what you'll see mostly in this video is me kind of running around the various levels, just sort of testing them for different features. One thing, especially in a later part of this video, you'll see that like these wide open spaces that you're seeing now are kind of useful, right? Because it feels enclosed, but not too small. And ultimately, like the camera doesn't have loads of really hideous clipping issues and that kind of thing. So what I kind of want is to have a reasonably good mixture of semi-open spaces for most of this. It all comes down to the feel of like making it not too claustrophobic underground. So anyway, we'll have a quick cut to some other asset packs, and we'll kind of see a few other different feature sets. I do like this one though. I think it's it works pretty well for the theme, the underground base building kind of thing. What I might do is have the bigger underground sort of base vaults come off a central cylindrical shape, because I like that sort of that sort of central thing. So I might keep this part as the sort of core of the base underneath the tower. The tower's the bit where you'll kind of start the game off and have access to a little bit of the underground. So silo pack definitely in. We'll be changing some of the lighting and things on here and making them more interactive, and probably putting a little bit more computerized control systems and maybe some robots and things in here. Of course, you'll be able to build these seating and sort of style and materials and things for yourself once you get in here, be able to rework some of the visuals so that you get more customization. But this one's a pretty strong pack in terms of just by default, it works out of the box, which is pretty good. Not many of them do that. So finding the assets like this is one of the sort of key drivers, right? The things that are going to drive the game much faster. You can see me playing here with the fact that a gamepad allows you to spin controls like cameras and stuff around you smoothly. So I'm just trying to pan the camera a little bit. It's not really easy to do with a mouse, not sort of smoothly. So, and again, I still need to fix that character up, because the oxygen tank should be a rigid body and not part of the skeletal system. So its skeletal mesh as you walk, the oxygen tank wobbles with you, which is really not what it's supposed to do. So, another thing to fix, another bug to solve. But there you go. I like that asset pack. I would give it a 8.5 out of 10. Not that we're scoring things or anything. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's subjective, isn't it, I suppose? Some people will like it, some people won't. Okay, so this next pack is, again, I don't know whether I did include in the last video, but we've got an asset pack for manufacturing robots and things. And I've got a warehouse pack that it is actually sort of meant to be manned by robots. So that's why I did the little robot kind of AI control stuff and the mass entity system. This particular one is a sci-fi lab, I think it's called, something like that on Fab. And this one will work really well for a particular part of the tower where you learn how to interact with some systems, and there will be a little bit of robotic manufacturing going on. Here I'm just sort of testing out the sort of scale of it and the visual quality and that kind of thing. I think it looks pretty good. It's on theme. The fact that it's got some robots, I'll have to rig those up to actually do some interactivity and things, building something. Maybe you'll have to build something to gain access to the vault underneath. But I do like the visuals of this one. Again, they work in theme. They feel right. Lighting's good. Textures are good. It's not a massive asset pack, it's just one room, so it'll fit really well in other parts. And these robot arms will make a big appearance in a bunch of other different parts of the game as well. Part of the automation system is about sort of setting up robots to pick, pack, sort, make, manufacture, you name it. We'll have quite a lot of these robotic style arms and things. So yeah, this one, pretty good. I would say, you know, a good 8 out of 10 at least. It's not rigged. You know, the robots don't do anything, which kind of as an asset you want them to be able to do. But they look good, which is a big, important step forward, right? Like making things look good. Oh, we're doing the camera rotating around the character thing again. But that lighting looks great, right? The doorways are a little bit kind of weird, but we'll see if they will maybe replace the doorways for this. I might incorporate this and maybe some medical stuff into like 2 slightly separated rooms for the tower setup. We'll see. Yeah, I like that one. Good pack. And then me switching one. So this particular asset is, I think it's sci-fi bunker, modular bunker or something. And this one's an interesting one. I bought it specifically for like the outside kind of concrete area with the doorways. But here's a few things that you'll need to sort of see, right? One is that like every staircase seems to have its own individual collision and you want it to be smooth when you're going up and down. So that's a thing to fix. But look at the difficulty going through these doorways. You know, the camera like struggles to get to see the character and things, and the narrowness of some of these walkways is pretty obvious. And it's something that you don't really think about when you're building until you like actually start kind of considering the gameplay and things. So like the ceilings are a little bit low, the camera's a little bit too constrained here. I also bought this pack because of the like planting spaces and that kind of stuff, because you'll be doing a bunch of hydroponics and some of this kind of thing will work all right. What I'll probably do is mix this with a different pack, you know, so that we're not like having this kind of camera chasing problem. So most of the ceilings inside the game will have much higher ceilings and not quite so claustrophobic. But visually, I mean, it kind of is on theme. I wouldn't say it's the best sort of quality asset ever, but it'll serve a purpose. Maybe parts of it I'll replace with others. I would say this is probably a sort of 6 or 7 out of 10 in terms of quality, you know, the quality threshold that I want to have. The one thing I will say is that all of these asset packs, I think I like the idea of having light coming in, so we'll have to figure out a way of making that work for almost all of the different areas that you'll eventually work on underground. Because I know it doesn't make an awful lot of sense to have sunlight coming through with underground bases, but it does make the lighting more interesting. You know, visually kind of everything's more appealing. So we maybe have like artificial lights. There's a particular light that the Mega Light system in Unreal Engine allows that you can do like projected. Essentially, it's like a projection screen kind of light. So I maybe replace the sunlight with those. We'll have to wait and see. But overall, you know, this kind of big open space is good, and the exit into the sort of base area is kind of what I was interested in, right? This concrete sort of, I don't even know what they're called, right? The bunker entrance, I suppose. So I might be using that. We'll see. We're definitely not using the desert and the rocks and stuff because these don't look great. So the next one we're looking at is what's called a sci-fi engineering room. And again, you can see that like the doorway and things is a little bit too enclosed. What I will say is that the quality of the assets here is pretty good. It's kind of the quality level I would like. But again, you know, like when you actually come down to it, it's just too claustrophobic. Like the camera control gets a bit sort of messed up and things, and this small of a room with, you know, like it's going to be bigger. pretty much every space that you'll live in will be bigger than this by, a considerable margin. But the quality level's good, the lighting looks good, the assets look good, so we'll definitely be using this pack. I would say visually this pack is probably a sort of 9 out of 10-ish. It's got the vibe, it's got the feel, it's got the look of the lighting and that kind of thing. So this is what the final game should kind of look like, but obviously for a much bigger underground sort of experience. It took me like 4 goes to import this one as well, because the original pack comes with the source files, the FBX files for the assets, and that somehow messes with the import system in Unreal Engine. So when you actually import it from Fab, it does import, but it overwrites some files, and that kind of messes the texturing up and stuff. So I finally figured that one out after a few tries. But again, we're going to have a quick spin around the character, because having the gamepad for like slow pans is really cool. I can't remember why I'm switching the costumes out here, but we'll rig that yellow costume up there and put that on the character at some point, because it looks cool. A little bit too spacey, but whatever. It's always an option. So doorways need to be bigger. Walkways need to be probably twice as wide as these ones are. But the lighting's good. The texturing's good. We'll just have everything bigger, everything more open, essentially. And more of it. And you'll be able to pick things up and store them and all of that kind of good stuff. So, like I said, I do like the look of this, but it needs to be much more interactive. You need to be able to lie in the bed and sleep. You need to be able to sit on the bench. You need to be able to type on the computers. The monitors need to actually show something useful. There's a lot of rigging up for even just a tiny little bedroom space like this. But visually, it kind of makes you feel like it's the right kind of place, right? It feels like it's a place that you could live in, which is ultimately what I'm kind of interested in. Everything's got to make you feel like you live in this world, because that's really what I'm interested in as a game sort of designer, is making immersive worlds, making worlds that feel, make you feel like you're part of it, right? Make you feel like you're having an impact on it. The things that you do have consequence. The things that you do make sort of logical and physical sense, right? The systems that you're kind of interacting with have an internal consistency, like they do things that you expect them to do because we've trained you how to expect them, So yeah, good asset pack. And this final one's going to have some audio. So we'll see how that sort of mixes with the voiceover. But ultimately, yeah. This particular asset pack is one of probably 3 that I'll merge together at some point. Maybe 4. I can't remember what this one is called. It's basically an oil rig. I think it's called Horror something or other. But actually this one isn't the final platform. Part of it will be used. Some of the sort of railings and that kind of thing. But I've actually got more of a container city to sit on top of the oil platform itself. And those come from different asset packs that I haven't imported yet. But what you see here is the fact that like the ultra dynamic sky, the sort of weather effects and the lightning and that kind of thing really add to the atmosphere of it. This particular scene is going to be a place called Pipetown, which is like it's a distribution hub for resources. So gas, water, power, all of that kind of stuff comes through the rig. The rig itself is set above a landscape, and the landscape will have some people on it. Essentially, the idea is that Pipetown controls, acts as a central hub for like connecting pipes together, and the pipes then branch out into different individual places. And it's visiting those places that will bring you more and more resources, more opportunities for choices for you to make. ultimately you're living underground, but you're going out into the world to try and sort of discover new opportunities, new people to help, new people to interact with, that kind of stuff. So Piketown's going to be an interesting and important place, and we're going to build up a community around it. Like the assets will be structurally about having humans live on this rig.